Hello, everyone, once again. And this is part two of how to use phenomenology in a research study or in your case study or however, whichever study or research you're conducting or will be conducting. This is the second part of what is phenomenology, and well, here it is. Phenomenologist Edward Herschel believes that experiences should be examined in the way of accords in its own terms. Essentially, today this is a practice used by many philosophers as well as educators to study the consciousness or experience of something, through their eyes, essentially first person point of view. Since phenomenology is a study of all experiences, it is constantly surrounding us and essentially can be applied to all aspects of life. Um, almost everything could be considered phenomenology. Anything that surrounds us, anything that we see, anything that we hear, anything that we feel, any experience that we may have can be considered phenomenology. It can be considered a phenomenon. But on the other hand, although this is what Herschel believed, Creswell, on the other hand, stated that it is best suited to understanding several individuals or shared experiences to a phenomenon. So essentially, he is more. Herschel was more open when it came to the terms of phenomenology and how it can be used, and Creswell is definitely making a statement where he believes it should be something where we study individuals or shared experiences to a phenomenon. So this steers us back to what is a phenomenon. For me, a phenomenon could be anything. Um, Anything that essentially happens, a fact or situation that is observed. So one who causes uh, this experience or explains this experience in question. According to Herschel, there's two different types of phenomenology. There's the interpretive and there's the descriptive. Um, the interpretive part of phenomenology attends to descriptions given by the subject or subjects in question, but then transposes their potential insight, resulting in a text or story about their phenomenon. Okay. On the other hand, the descriptive portion of phenomenology, the researcher attends to description just as interpretive, but then goes through the process of dissecting the descriptions to discover the essential meaning and interrelationships, which essentially is more appropriate descriptive part of phenomenology for at least my study on improvisation and how, or my capstone study, and how improvisation can be introduced into a high school setting. To continue on the descriptive uh, part of phenomenology, the researcher in this aspect ensures that there is no preconceptions of original thinking that will disrupt the original analysis of the experience from the subject. So essentially, I got to go in there with an open mind and not something that I had preconceived in my head of what I believe or what I think happened or how I feel about this. I should go in completely um, completely free of any preconceptions. Once you come up with an idea not an idea essentially, but something that you want to research, a phenomenon that you want to research, uh, you will need to obviously create some essential questions. Now, this is very important to any study, but these essential questions are particularly important when we're dealing with phenomenology, and using this in our studies. Once again, this is a very important aspect to any research and case study, especially when we're considering the practice of phenomenology. The common way data collection is used in phenomenology is the in-depth interview process of participants, one in which we have used in our education classes before. In our, I'm sure who's ever taken a class with Kathy or Patrick, you'll note that we have conducted these interviews with each other, amongst others. It's a very important and probably the most effective way of conducting a research in through the philosophical approach of phenomenology. But this does not this should not deter you from using other aspects as well. We can always use more than one. For instance, observations, conducting observations, interviews, journals, tape conversations, even formally written responses are all forms of observations that can be used. I would state that the best way to go about conducting a phenomenologist case study is by conducting interviews, because you can get a unique and first-hand experience when you so-called, as I like to say, you hear it from the horse's mouth. The number of participants is really not a factor when we're conducting a phenomenology study. It is pretty much left to the researcher how many subjects or participants he needs to conduct a well quantitative and qualitative balanced collection of data and analysis is what the researcher should use. Sometimes during the study you can add more participants and the data requirement for the study is met, but not all the time. Usually, you should have a set number of students or students of subjects. In this case, students. Yes, that you would like to conduct the study with. These essential questions are really of utmost importance when conducting a phenomenology. The questions need to be worded very carefully so the participant can respond to the question in depth and as natural and unbiased as possible. This is important because you want to gain insight on the person's first-hand experience. Okay, and view it in their eyes. If you ask a question, obviously that is too basic, or a yes or no question, you're bound to get limited responses, and this does not work well in a phenomenology approach to the study. The questions should never assume anything about the subject's experience, lead them toward an answer, or be closed in any way. So I shouldn't be asking yes or no questions. I should be asking questions where I can have an open dialogue with the subject, and me as a researcher. My main focus is listening. I want the subject to be comfortable. This brings my next point. Make sure that the area where we're doing it is an area of comfort for both you and the subject, assuming that you are the researcher, because this can really change key aspects of that person's responses, or even the way you're conducting your questioning. Make sure that this is taped somehow, either on recording, but better yet on a video, so that way you can see reactions, because this is important in assessing the emotion and of somebody's first-hand experience. Like, you want to get into into what they experienced and how they experienced it, and there's a lot of different ways in which we could see this. How somebody says something, the way somebody says something, in the order in which they say something, what reactions they get when they say something or when you ask a question. With that being said, you should never ask a question that would assume anything about the subject's experience, or lead them towards an answer. Like, we're not trying to put words in other people's mouths or try to get an answer that we're looking for. We're looking for a raw first-hand experience answer, the closest to how they feel, and so we can gain insight in their mind. So keeping the questions limited in ideas or information that is given out is important, because it can clearly give insight into a subject's first-hand experience in their own words. Gustakos, a well-known phenomenologist, indicated 2 essential questions that can be asked towards a subject. These questions are: 1, what have you experienced in terms of the phenomenon in question? And also, in what contexts or situations have typically influenced or affected their experience or experiences of the phenomenon? These 2 questions can be used in your research, in your phenomenology research, and I would make sure that the researcher that the questions are open. And so, once again, there's a constant dialogue between you and the subject, where there is no fear from the subject to speak openly, while the researcher listens carefully to what is said, when it's said, and how it's said. For instance, like I was stating before, sound and pitch and attitude, the way things are said, are all important in noting when observing and listening to the subjects in question. Once again, the setting should be comfortable for both you and the research, for both the subject and the researcher. And taping this is of utmost importance. That way, we can study at a later time. For a descriptive, instead of interpretive, when we're dealing with descriptive, this is where descriptive will kind of change in terms of phenomenology study. For a descriptive phenomenology, the transcript will be essential when deriving key aspects or components of the interview into place into meaningful units. Things that come up that are common themes, similarities, or differences. These are all, or a significant statement from the dialogue that took place. These are all important when reaching the descriptive part of phenomenology. The point here is to continue to stretch the imagination, so that it can be twisted and turned in every way possible until it loses identity. So, essentially, we want to stretch out these experiences and twist and turn them to the point where it's not the experience anymore, and that's when you know you have conducted the study correct. The researcher can present all of these findings, experiences, or phenomenon at the end. So this once again, this video is very important to incorporating proper phenomenology study. With this being said, this is how phenomenology can be utilized in a study, which may present itself in your project, capstone, or thesis, past, present, or future, and it adds another dimension to approach a study or field of experience, or field experience of interest in a structured and well-balanced philosophical approach. Once again, my name is Chris Castro, and thank you for your time.